So we heard a lot talking about data is new oil whatsoever. And in the sector, we're already seeing a lot of development of using already collected data and newly formulated framework to collect new data to help to make insights, make decisions. And broadly looking into data usage falls into the category, whatever buzzword you're talking about, AI, machine learning, or data science, or in the same ballpark is how to use data-driven solution or more objective way of making a decision, or at least decision support to help various different industry to gain the efficiency, to gain profit, productivity, customer satisfaction, whatsoever the terms you want to use. It is already being evident in transport sector. I'm sure that a lot of the success story from the audience that we can talk through. The purpose, as Susan illustrates, as we're going to share this information, at least share our success, share the, showcase some of the data, and the usage, and how we make decision, how to make the transport work or sector or companies business better. Cross-sector is very important, not limited to inside transport sector. I think now the whole world is become very connected pieces. Pandemic is one of the example. Good or bad, we see a lot of data actually cross. It's not a health problem anymore. It's across various different sector. I think transport is the same thing. Transport is linked to every bits of the community, every bits of the business running the country. So, and then one is the transport sector contribute significantly to every part of the community. Also take data and take influence, impact, or input from other community as well. I don't need to put a lot of rambling around that one. Take example weather. It's not a particular transport sector, but of course a lot of people here has been using data from the weather and been part of our integral analytics framework anyway. And then if we're looking into the EV or connected vehicle, energy is one of the very integrated party of transport now. So another one worthwhile mention is the best practice that's coming out of the, we know in the boundaries, we know in the barriers, and I'm sure there's a lot of lessons learned, and we would love to share here with the community who has interest in that. Last but not least is this starting at the moment is Australian small bubble. We're talking about these sharing services. I'm sure that at some stage we'll link to the international parties as well. And I already been having some informal conversations with a few colleagues around the globe, and from later onwards, working with ITS Australia together, I think we will bring some international stories into this as well. So not wasting more time of everyone, and then myself and Stephen as a guinea pigs for the first set of talks. So we're just going to talk through some of the work we're doing here as just the first lot. And we're also very happy to receive any comments or suggestions of the other successful stories or speakers for other sessions later on. Any quick questions before I start talking about some of the work we did through the pandemic time in primarily last 2 months? Okay, now I'm going to talk through some of the work we did with the New South Wales state government. on this COVID impact analysis. This is a very quick assembled workforce together with the state government and the various different institutes, from policymaker to data analytics institute like us. We've been working quite hectically. Yeah, can someone yeah, mute please. I heard some noise. Yeah, thank you. So this is unprecedented time of pandemic. We struck by this event in the unprepared fashion, but I guess all the government has to respond very quickly from the spread of the disease to the job to the impact of various different communities. So I'm going to talk through some work we did. Some of them are in transport sector. Some of them are broad socio-economical impact from that perspective. So just one sentence talking about our Data Science Institute from the UTS. Actually, it's a newly established Data Science Institute end of or late last year. And we assemble a critical mass around data science, software engineers, and we have plenty of PhD students. So far, it's more than 150 people altogether. So let me move into some interesting work, which this is a chart. Let me explain what this chart means. So when the pandemic happens, Australia is a couple of weeks behind a lot of international countries. I mean, behind is our spread of disease actually is behind other countries like China, Korea, Japan, Italy, a lot of European countries and North Americans. So what we trying to learn, I mean, we means overall Australian government, is what are the policies in place from other countries and the impact or measures from those countries, whether those ones have any lessons learned that Australian government or Australian citizens or communities can learn from. So this is a bit of analysis based on the Apple movement data. If you look at it, the bottom is, sorry, I missed out the timeline, which is days. The x-axis is the days of the policy in place after the first 100 cases found in each of the country. So the green one is Australia, and we have, for example, these pink ones are Canada. We have Italy, all those various different countries. By the way, if anyone interested in the actual result, send me an email later. I'm happy to share all these. These Tableau result is actually in the open space. So this is the bottom line. Is bottom part of that is when the policies are in place, and the top one is from the Apple movement data to see the curves and the how the movement look like. Of course, this is at a country level. Next one is the similar analysis, but based on the Google movement data. Released as a publicly released data. Same thing is different dots means the time of different policy actually coming into place, and this is how the overall movement look like. So all those ones give us a sense of overall movement. In order to know the details into zones or regions or LGAs, we put together an analytics platform as a GIS based. This is also, yeah, you can look into the web link here. It's public in public space too. Which is helping working with the state government, looking into the overall business impact of the different regions. We look into the employment impact, looking at rent changes, looking at the vulnerable communities, such as regional, such as aged care, and some of the focus on the mental health. And then what else? In the transport, we look into the bus delays, which will be the focus of this talk. I'm going to spend more time, but let me race through some of the work, at least no ballpark of how various different data sets bring together under this unprecedented time. So this is around the rental changes. Of course, it's as I said, it's New South Wales based. And this blue line is the volume change in April compared to February. So you can see the volume change. There are some points with dipping quite a bit, but otherwise is reasonable stable. But so this is the red curve is the price change. And you can see some parts of the New South Wales change significantly. For example, this one is Sydney. We know Sydney as a CBD as a one zone changes significantly, about 30% dipping into the rents. And interesting, there are some parts even in the positive zone, which is a very rare case. It's only one or two regions. This is some plot around aged care facilities and the risk of them. This left plot is the COVID cases the COVID spread, and this is the aged care facilities which have overlaid with the COVID, and then indicated the risk of various different aged care facilities. This is coming from, this is talking about the business impact rates, and then you can look into various different impacted regions. Of course, the darker the color, and the impact is more severe. And the left, this one is divided them into different industry sectors. For example, is retail, wholesale trades, electricity, gas, and mining as a top manufacturer. And of course, you can see that the most impacted is the accommodation and the food sector. Transport is here, is one down, is quite impacted as well. Job reduction, left is again is showing the different region where is the most hit. Of course, the more city around the city is the most hit area, and this is around the sector as well divided. So you can see accommodation and the food services is the heavily impacted. By the way, it's the work. Sorry, the data is up to mid-April. Next one, it's a community sentiment overall, and mental health or anxiety is one of the really big indicators government look into at this stage, because these are, as I said, the community has been pushed or impacted so hard by at such a speed. So this is showing overall community sentiment, and we monitor that day by day to look into what are the changes or big changes or jump in some of the zones, and to see what some actions need to take if the community sentiment changed significantly. A mobility impact, this again is coming from Google mobility data, and we looked into the visits to different type of business. This one is for a restaurant. You can see that the presentation is the green one, means much less visit than February, and red one means a lot more visited than February, which is not a surprise. The grocery shops increase significantly, and restaurant decrease significantly. Let me spend the next number of minutes to talk more into the analysis related to transport, in this case, which is the bus delays. So we all know that bus stops. This is have a particular geolocation, and also bus routes, and this is showing the location, particularly in CBD and the eastern suburbs. So the data we use is GTFS, and a lot of people working in this sector knowing very well of this one is real-time bus stop position data, and then the recorded real-time movements with longitude, latitude, and associated timestamps. So if you look at this chart, the green line is actually according to the timetable, each of the stops where the GPS location or the should be, and then this example of the real trajectory of the one bus in the yellow or orangish, which is with some of the delays. So, and of course, delays is compared to the standard timetable. We have done this bus performance analysis around a particular Sydney region for a long time, past, I can't remember, maybe 3-5 years. And this is some of the past examples of how different bus route look like, what's the average delay, what's the particular one delay. If you look at this chart, each of the dots is one bus stop, and the color indicates the delay, how much delay it is. More a darker color shows a more delay at that bus stop. We actually have built a tool which you can see. You can select the different routes. You can select different time to look into the bus running situation. For this COVID particularly, this is the piece of analysis we did, and then together with Simona and the other colleagues, this has become the first COVID publication in the book. Published is going to be published by in very prestigious international publisher. So on this one, you can see that the left one is accumulated confirmed case of COVID in March, and then this is the change of the bus delays. This is a little bit counterintuitive. Is darker the color means a lot more changes in the bus delay. That means probably delay less in this zone. So let's look into more details into what the result look like. For example, this is talking about the Western Sydney and the Eastern Sydney. The medium, the solid one is a medium delay, and you have a different time. You can see various different peaks, and the quite interesting comparison is looking at in the Eastern Sydney at the peak hours, it has a 36% less delay, dropped to 36%, but in Western Sydney is only about 15. And then the reasoning behind that is actually CBD has been affected a lot by one is restaurant, a cafe, all those ones stopped. So less people come to the CBD. On Western Sydney part, there's a lot of essential services like hospitals, warehouses, etc. even the critical infrastructure like dams, like all those maintenance, the work as is as a central services. So that's why people still go into Western Sydney part to work as usual, a lot more than the CBD part. That's probably is the reason behind why the Eastern Sydney, particularly CBD, the bus become quite smoothly running on the street. So if you're particularly looking at the CBD and the Bondi Junction area, you can see that that was in the past a lot of red dots because a lot of delays. And then yeah, in March you can look into a lot better. And then we are still plotting more of the later result of April and May. Let's move to my last slides, which is ongoing work of monitoring the behavior changes. There's new rules introduced to Sydney Public Transport Network. I mean, this can change day by day. And then for the short-term work is looking at the patronage, what's the demand look like, how's the supply meeting with the demand. Social distancing monitoring is based on some information we can get, and also distribution of the OD matrix, etc. Other stuff like how do people adjust their travel plans to avoid the peak hours? How have a staggered going back to work practice? How would that impact the transport network, and how transport network is going to support those ones? I'm sure that some people here from Transport New South Wales involved in plenty of the work as well. And a few other items worth mentioning is one is multimodal transport. The split mode shift now becoming interesting because private cars probably viewed as safer, and also in order to maintain the social distancing, and is required for some more involvement from the public cars and then car parks where to provide, and so make the transition easier. The last not least is the impact towards the regional and the vulnerable groups, like a regional, particular those areas be hit twice or three times by drought and bushfire and now COVID, and how would how would that impact transport, and also how would transport and other infrastructure support better of those communities. So I'm not going to talk leads to the long-term research. I'm more than happy to collaborate and with any people who has their interest in some of the topics around the long-term, what's the long-term change of the behavior, how go to work, how the even work locations or parking, all those ones be more sensitive to the new norm of working from home. I'm sure a lot more companies started to consider that one as even semi-permanent. So I will leave here. Thank you very much for listening. I think the next one, it's Stephen. Are you going to take that on? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Feng. I'll share my screen as well. Stacey, I'll just get you to confirm you can see that.
Sure can.
Thank you. Before I start, I'd also like to welcome everyone. Seeing the large number of people is really encouraging, and I think we can get some really good things done. I'd like to thank the ITS team, Susan and Stacey, for pulling this together. I think it's a really important community of practice, and I think the ITS Australia leadership on these sorts of initiatives continues to flow through, regardless of whether we can meet in person or via the digital format. I'd also like to, I guess, recognise the work that Fang has done is actually pulling this together, and it's always exciting to work with someone, with so much energy and drive to continue to move things forward. I've been asked to present a case study on the use of some of the historical traffic flow data that Intellimatics has at the moment, and looking at a specific roadworks initiative carried out in Victoria, which was around the Hodel Street area. And I'll get more onto that specifically in a minute. One of the things I would like to do, though, is also recognise someone else on the call, our Senior Product Manager, John Cardoso. A lot of this is his work and his team. And also, it's a bit of a relief to me that he's on the call in case I get any really difficult questions. So I'll start and go through, and I'll try and keep this moving as much as I can. I think a lot of people on the call will know Intellimatics. We've been around for 20 years. We've been a member of the ITS Australia community for over 10. We've been working in connected vehicle for a long time, but we're also about 12 years ago developed a real-time traffic product that has been utilised by many millions of people throughout Australia and New Zealand. So we're backed by RACV, and we, as we say there, we see ourselves as a leader of real-time traffic information in Australia. So we'll talk a little bit about the data, the way in which we capture data. Through the years, there's been a lot of ways in which we've done it. We actually started working with road authorities, picking up information at intersections, off the loops, and going through some modelling to create the way in which traffic was behaving, and then we've over the years been able to augment that with things such as real-time probe devices, and also looking at connected devices as well. So that could be connected vehicles, either organisations that we're working with, or we would bring some data in. There's other ways of capturing it, so a lot of traffic cameras, and we also capture a large number of incidents, and have captured over 200,000 incidents over the time. And we do that through a number of means. And one of the things that I won't go into now, but we've also worked on creating a set of algorithms that actually understand when there's an incident that's occurred in the network, just by understanding what the traffic behaviour is in that network, and it helps us locate those incidents. So as I say, we've created over 200,000 incidents over the time. So through that, we've been broadcasting information to vehicles for a long time. We've also created information through an API. So organisations are taking our information from a direct feed. And I think a really good example of what we've been able to do was over the summer this year, where there was a lot of information coming out about road closures through the bushfires. They were coming from the state organisations, but weren't making their ways to all of the mapping providers. So Intellimatics worked with some of the mapping providers and the state organisations to create over 1,000 road closure information that could then be broadcast through the more commonly used maps. So I think we are continuing to work through, not just in the areas where, for those who understand the concept of broadcasting traffic, but also to create a wider range of traffic services in wider modes. What we've also done over the last 2 years is really looked at that data provision and what we've been capturing. And through that time, we've captured over 100 terabytes of data, and we've worked to create a number of new and what we see as pretty progressive data products. So they're listed here on the screen, and we'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk a lot more about the flow products that we've got now. In terms of that, we also have historical. So from 2016 to 2019, we have information on all major roads at a 15-minute interval. We can break that down further, but we think 15 minutes probably the way in which that's going to be most used. We're also looking at count, and that's something that we're developing at the moment. Incidents, as we've said, we have more than 200,000 incidents historically and continue to capture them today. And, you know, looking further ahead, we'll be looking at an origin destination product suite, because we do understand the nature of movement, the nature of how people are moving and what they're doing. So to get onto the specific use case that we're talking about, so anyone who lives in Melbourne, over 2018 would understand that travelling down Hoddle Street was pretty interrupted, particularly in the evenings as they were continuing to do some major works. And specifically, over that period, throughout the day, 330,000 people travel along Hoddle Street and across things like Swan Street, Bridge Road, those sorts of things. So what they did, what the government was doing, was developed up a number of works to improve the flow, including Victoria's first continuous flow intersection. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what we've done is we had a look at the analysis of a month in 2017 and 2019, and then we looked to compare those and just see, you know, how effective that actual road work was. So if I go to the next slide. So people in Melbourne, or anyone who's visited Melbourne, probably recognise this area because the MCG is over here, and this is like fairly typical sort of traffic. So in 2017, this intersection was pretty much what you would expect. You've got your normal turning and, you know, normal turning lane in here. And so there was often a large bank up of vehicles heading up this way. And so the talk about what a continuous flow intersection is, the change to it is that the turning lane then became into this slip lane road here. There was the geometry of the lane turning out of Swan Street into Punt Road was also changed, and also allowed sort of the public transport and other vehicle flows to continue on. So that's specifically what that was. So based upon looking at a couple of years data comparing the 2017 and 2019, what we essentially saw is that in terms of the streamlining project, that the peak hour congestion was reduced by up to 14%. And specifically, we looked across the month of August in 2017 versus 2019. And what we found was that there was a 4 kilometre an hour increase in free flow across the month. So that's very significant in terms of the fact that, and you know, I think as someone who goes through that intersection very often, I have seen that as well. So I guess a couple of things we're seeing here is that the use of historical data in this scenario is very important. What we're understanding is that through that intersection now, through most of the day, free flow is very, very similar to what it was. But specifically the morning peak has had a really good increase in free flow speed and a reduction in the congestion. So this is just sort of one very light example of how you could use historic data versus current data. But you can see I've included on the bottom of this slide the interest that this bit of information picked up. There was, you know, it's always strong interest from the media in terms of anything to do with congestion, vehicle use, those sorts of things. And so I think that essentially why they thought this was an important topic was there's a lot of roadworks that goes on at all times, but often people don't actually understand specifically what the impact of that could be, what the improvements that are created. And so I think it is quite newsworthy. Similarly, at the moment, you know, we're doing work looking at sort of week to week what the travel increase is as you know, the conditions start to ease in terms of restrictions based upon the COVID-19, and continuing to communicate to people about, you know, we're seeing an increase in traffic flow, you know, with people still somewhat concerned about public transport, with schools going back. You know, there'll be a number of things that we'll be able to do, and as we get this information on a day-to-day basis, we can continue to push forward with that and provide that information. Similarly, we're currently developing up the ability to visualise some of these things on a more up-to-the-minute basis, and so there'll be more information on that coming out. So I deliberately went very, very fast through that. I hope that provided a bit of an insight into what we've done in relation to that Hodel Street project. We have the historic data for every main road in Australia between 2016 and 2019 available. For the flow, we're continuing to work on the count information, and that will soon be available. It's available for New South Wales at the moment, will be available for Victoria soon. In telematics, we've been in this for a while. We see a lot of potential and benefit moving forward. We are about partnerships. We are about working closely with organisations. So if anything that you've seen here today or anything else that is of any interest, please get in contact. We really look forward to partnering and being able to use some of the data that we've been collecting for a long time. So with that, I will finish up. Is there any questions about any of that?
There are a couple more generally. I'll just go back to Fang. It was a quick question for you with regards to the potential for social media bias on the work that you were doing.
Yeah, I just scanned through that one. There's a lot of bias on social media. There's a lot of untrue message, tweeting, retweeting. We don't go to there. I think what we try to understand is the overall sentiment. Sentiment is particularly you feel. I mean, from the tweets perspective, is more positive. Towards the environment or life or etc. versus the other is with anxiety and mental health focus. So we only screening towards those ones, which is the sentiment and sentiment changes. So also in the particular, not a focus on individuals, is overall like a group of people at least at the LGA level of the sentiment vary. For example, when you look at the particular COVID impacted areas, you can see impacted hard or severely impacted area. You can see the sentiment volatility a lot more than the other areas, relatively safe or less cases or less, aged care facilities with those kind of cluster, etc. So definitely agree there's a lot of bias there, but so far the focus is not around the bias, it's around how to capture the sentiment and those ones, how to help with at least some insight for the government to make some kind of a decision. So looking into that.
Great, thanks, Ben. And there's quite a few comments coming through.
Guys, Brent speaking. What I'd really love to do is abstract the dialogue up just one level higher to about national state of data and some of the things that are happening overseas. If that would be okay, Stephen as the chair and Susan and guys.
Sure.
So I prepared, and this is not a company spam or whatever, but I think it's worthwhile just reflecting on some of the high level rather than individual case studies about what's happening.
Brent, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, Susan. So for the team, Brent Stafford, I'm at an organisation called Directed. We're supplying heavy vehicle telematics and some data across different vehicle brands, navigation systems, etc. But obviously been in the ITS space for a few years. And I just thought I'd pull together some slides in preparation for the meeting, just to try and give a bit of an overview of some of the areas where data's sort of broadly in use today, and to have a bit of a sort of thought starter about types of data. In our business in heavy vehicle telematics, like many telematics providers, we're not the only one in the region. We're gathering data on a daily basis across national networks. And that data includes, in this case, heavy vehicle data about everything from headlight status to windscreen wipers to vehicle weight. It's very, very broad data. And that obviously is leveraged by corporations to manage fuel and fuel idle, etc. But there's public goodwill elements that can also be used in that area. And if we look at a high level of data that's out there today, we've got lots of open data. Much of it's static data. There are some dynamic data elements being provided with public transport and the like. There's been a lot of work in the area with ITS Australia. We've got the architecture. There's an early prototype of a data exchange called ANZDAR. TCA have got the Transport Industry Exchange, and there's new programs for road authority data for connected automated vehicles, etc. So there's the public transport, there's the automotive, and there's the infrastructure sides. From a car company perspective today, there's open data everywhere. So today you can go into an API and download data from BMW or Dynafleet. Company Spam, we also do the same. We open up data, for example, with Mercedes-Benz, where you can get fuel levels, brake status, vehicle weight, trailer status, airbags on, temperatures, etc., etc. So this sort of open API access to data today is very common, not only domestically, but also abroad. Obviously, from an industry perspective, there's lots of industry authoritative data, much of it via data-driven approaches, as well as some journalistic content. IA, Here Traffic, TomTom, and then aggregators who work with those providers to aggregate solutions into software, and then obviously the software goes into vehicles like we do with navigation. In our space today, there's lots of heavy vehicle data needs, much of it dynamic. A lot of the static data is already accounted for today. And from the dynamic data perspective, just a couple of examples might be things like real-time traffic signal data to afford trucks green light corridors or heavy vehicle intersection priority to reduce braking emissions, etc. Variable speed or dynamic speed sign data is critically required, as are things like weighbridges or petrol station queues or charge bay status, etc. Now, these are sort of public goodwill elements that are required, and whilst there's a lot of individual approaches towards the provisioning of this data, certainly in this type of fora, the dialogue about harmonisation, national open API access, etc., would be valuable. Also, things like the example there, we've got a concept nav system at the moment that's looking at exposing through image breakthrough rather than audio breakthrough the fact that there's an emergency vehicle in proximity. The good thing about standards is there's so many to choose from, and even in this EU example, in this data exchange or data aggregation area, there's Phoenix, there's Data4PT, which is a brand new one that's out with UITP in the last couple of days. There's many, there's DataX2, there's NetEX, etc. Many different data exchange and data harmonisation platforms. Which one you choose, of course, is probably another topic for discussion. And when we think about those issues that will challenge us as an industry, irrespective of the mode of transport or the load of transport, there are commerce elements, there's identity elements, driver identity, vehicle identity, the capacity of a vehicle, the vehicle status health-wise or registration-wise, etc. And there's all sorts of rights management, etc. And I think that drilling into some of these areas and the way that current generation platforms allow for data interoperability, whether it's the example of public transport real-time data provisioning, as was shown, or Stephen's example of the control of intersections, etc. There's a lot of capacity today to bring these together. We don't necessarily have to build new systems, but we do have to understand how the contemporary systems are working. And certainly, removing the fragmentation, having rights management, looking at industry connectors, looking at the capacity to integrate data platforms and making sure data is accessible across different points in the pipeline is really important for all of us as stakeholders, along with things that could be industry benefits like predictive maintenance or better managing of public transport capacity given social distancing requirements, etc. So that's a sort of a bit of a high level overview that I think it would be really important to start to think about it as a group, and it's important for us from an industry side to think about where are those areas that we need to play. Do we need to build platforms, or do we need to have a dialogue about how platforms could connect at the national level, recognising that a lot of this stuff's being done overseas anyway. We're not building vehicles here today, but we're building a few different platforms here. But how do we harness the benefit of standards that are available in North America and Europe when we've already got domestic standards and avenues to integrate those, like that ATMCC, which is still live, provisioning traffic data across multiple providers. So those are just a few thought starters at a high level, not drilling down to cases.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, look, and I think we do have a section about the scope of the COP coming up, but really good oversight of what's going on, and in a really quick time as well. So well done. I think, Stacey, there's a number of questions that have come up through there. Do you want me to just sort of take this through?
Yeah, I think Fen's responded to the one with regards to AIML, but they're quite comprehensive. So if you want to have a crack, alternatively, I think some people have been responding to them in the chat. So
okay, all right. Well, I might ask John Cardoso if he doesn't mind to come up if we start talking about the impact of using historical information as part of machine learning and what that impact could be. Just an easy one to kick you off, John.
Thank you. Well, yeah, there was a comment from Adrian about the accuracy and the historical data from TomTom. To train models, you have to resort to data and the granularity and the shape of the data, and the length of your time series will determine the quality of your model. There is not much magic. A lot of people talk about different methodologies and different models to be used, but the reality, your model is as good as your data, right? And I think the biggest difference that will make a model perform beyond the quality of the data that you input is your ability to validate the model and continue to recalibrate. So it's okay to start with a historical model in situations like COVID. What's important is that model is what they call have a closed loop, and is connected to the infrastructure and can be continued revalidated in real time every single day. In our case, we calibrate our models every 15 minutes based on the volume of traffic we see on the road, and that will help us to avoid those skews. So that would be my 2 cents on that one, Steve.
Thanks, John. Well done. I think you've got there. Another one from Chin Ho about set on major roads across Australia. You elaborate on that. Potentially, Jim, maybe the best thing for me to do is we can contact you. But John, do you want to give a 1 minute view of what we mean by major roads?
You're referring to our current coverage of major road?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we currently focus on, when we decide which roads to cover, there is always a compromise between the amount of data, the granularity, and the coverage. And when we make those decisions, we are thinking about what makes the biggest impact. So we focus on the amount of population or the amount of traffic we're actually covering, as opposed to just go blankly across all geographical coverage. Because Australia is a very particular country, right? You have a lot of density on very small areas, very condensed areas, and then you have a whole continent that's empty. So just going after geographical coverage will not actually deliver the results you expect and increase your operational costs a lot. So we focus on covering 90% of all traffic on the roads. That's how we make the decision.
Okay, thanks, John. So there's been a few other questions. I understand there's been one to Fang that again has been answered as part of the chat, and I think we've got one about data security being a focus. It's in the agenda, so absolutely, and another one about data gaps. So there's no. Oh, hang on, more messages.
So I think much with regards to the data gaps that will be covered in the addressing the scope.
Yeah,
that's what we're getting to now.
Why don't we move to that now, Stacey?
Yeah, I think you should all have it in the agenda. Don't have it on a slide. So these are the broad scope of activities that have been identified as being of value and useful. So we're looking at having a discussion with this community to understand, to Kanav's point, is there an opportunity to task a smaller working group with a gap analysis of existing data sets, or some kind of data ecosystem or matrix? And I think Brent touched on that as well. There's a huge rate of standards out there and APIs and other platforms for data sharing. What are we missing? What can we use? Is there a platform that would benefit from this information? Is there something that's already out there that's been done? We don't want to be repeating work that others have already completed. So that's kind of where we were with that scope, to insert some activities underneath it. And that's where this roundtable discussion for the last, 15, 20 minutes or so of this was to get some sense from you guys as to what don't we know, what should we know, and how do we go about doing it. And we've also...
Oh, sorry. You finished first, and then yeah.
Just with regards to the survey that we sent out, Simona and Fang have done some analysis on that. I think that would be beneficial, because we'd like to use that as a continuing tool to engage with you guys too. So, but that's it for me.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Stacey. We sent out a survey to the group and received quite some response. I think it's worthwhile to work through quickly on the survey, and if the survey hasn't, if some people haven't responded to that one and wanted to jump out to have a quick, recommendation suggestions, we can do that afterwards. I may hand over to, Simona, have a quick go through, and then, I leave to Stephen to open to the floor to other discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fang. Good morning, everyone. This is very interesting in terms of the discussions that we're having and the questions that pop out. So I work side by side with Fang inside UTS and following the trends in all the, let's say, data science driven algorithms that can be applied, and we have a huge interest to see how this whole impact situation has changed not only our behavior but also the way people perceive and move around the city. So I guess what do we want to achieve from this data cooperation, this data initiative? It's really engaging with people from all over Australia and understanding what is their interest, what is lacking out there, where are the gaps that we need to fill in, and also what are the potential directions that need to be explored. So we have received, I think, about 25 responses from the survey that has been launched. And for those of you who haven't had the chance to respond to that survey, we'll share the link again after this meeting together with the recordings of the video, and we will be happy to have your feedback. I will share my screen now. Just a second, and just 1 second. And let me know if you see it. Can you see my screen? It's can you see the slide? Can you see?
We can see that, Simona. Can you just make it as a slideshow? It just makes your slide a bit bigger.
Yep. Let me see. Is it better now?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So the first interest that we had is to understand what is the audience expertise in terms of transport data set handling around Australia. So this is just a word cloud that we put together, but also this is a list of what people that have responded have been working on. So it was interesting for us to see that majority of the respondents, they worked previously on network performance, understanding where the congestion happens, where are the bottlenecks in the traffic network, and why in general do we do that is to model the risks that we have for various incidents. Road safety is a big topic that people have been working on previously, and it is a huge point of interest. Also, we have noticed that there is quite a good expertise in modeling driver behavior, and also how freeways, motorways are performing across our cities. So not only that, so not only the data analytics, not only the driving behavior, but also the trends, and what is going to happen in terms of model share. Also, there are people who have been working on forecasting and also on real-time traffic analytics, which we would love to hear from them as well, to understand and complement our experience and the way we can work together. So once again, a lot of focus on crash data, safety, travel time analysis. Only one person worked with Opel car data before, which I would love to know more about, and where the hotspots in the city appear. All in overall, this is the capability of the respondees, but we please do answer to the survey and give us more information about yourself. We'd love to know more, and who knows, in the future sessions that we will plan for the data COP, you'll get also a chance to speak, to present what has been done and interact with the other audience. Now, where do we want to go? And I think this is the question for all of us now that we are logged in today, in order to understand and get the best benefit out of this initiative. So these are your thoughts. This is what people are interested in. What I have seen, there is a huge amount of interest in terms of how do I identify what data sets are available in the transport community across Australia and internationally. So again, just what has been presented earlier by Brent, people are really thirsty to know, okay, I need to know what are all the data sets available, what I can use, how can I access that data set, how can I implement that into my own application. So probably what is happening in Australia at the moment, there is how should I say, there are small and bits of pieces of data sets for each state around the country, and probably this is not transparent for everyone. So it will be fantastic to have like some sort of collective information about anything that is existing in terms of data around Australia. Also, a lot of people are interested about sharing. So sharing these transport data sets for different reasons, not only just for industry purposes, improving some products that people are working on or industries are working on, but mostly to share experience. And I think there is a very high interest to share that experience of how these data sets have been used, what benefit did they bring to the community, what knowledge did we get from it? Because just like you said, Stacey, we don't want to repeat the same things over and over again. And if somebody has done that already, it's fantastic. We just improve on it, or we just do something else that might bring more information. So definitely sharing of data, sharing of experience, knowledge, and also networking. So I'm really happy that people want to continue doing the networking in transport, in the transport community. And I believe that ITS Australia really provides that platform. And I'm happy that even under this Corona situation, we're still managing to get this information exchange. People also want to collaborate with each other. So that was one of the suggestions we had. We want to collaborate with other people. Some expressed interest to collaborate with academia just to learn more about some innovative solutions or some new techniques for handling the data. So definitely there is a scope for collaborating and pushing the discussion further. And I would like to close this one by saying that I think everybody's interested to know where Australia is heading in terms of data set. Where are we going? What is the strategy? Is there a national strategy in how to handle this whole data collection, data handling, data accessibility? How do we handle privacy? Today has been raised as well by Blake from Transport for New South Wales. How do we handle privacy in the data sets? And do we need to handle privacy for all of the data sets out there, or is it just some particular ones that are being more sensitive? So once again, this is a summary of what we have from you, and I would be curious and I would love to have more suggestions from your side on what you would like to hear more from the new catch-up, and how would you like to engage with the whole networking community across the data in transportation.
Thanks, Simona. So if you could leave that slide up, it might be actually useful.
Yes.
So time to hear from everyone else now. I've heard a lot from us. Just either you could use a raise hand, put notes in the chat, whatever works best for you. If you do speak, it would be great to see you, so if you turn your video on. So I guess just open it up to the floor. There was a few notes in the agenda. There's a lot of information on this slide. Does anyone have any initial thoughts about, how to keep the scope open enough so that we get the right levels of conversation, but also not so that it's just so large that we're not going to really make any progress anywhere? What do people think? So we've got a hand up with Bertus there.
Yes, it's Bertus here. The one thing that actually have been discussed earlier in this meeting is the fact that we're talking about data sets, and as we see that our traditional way of looking at data sets and traffic planning and all sorts of other planning has changed with the way people behave in the modern information age. So the reality is lots of the stuff which we're talking about needs to be measured against old data sets, but we need to have more real-time data out there. So there need to be a focus on how we actually can bring in data sets or real-time data or close to real-time data faster, but that brings some challenges which I just posted there, so I will just add that. And that the common word we use in ISO standards world, I'm a ISO standards expert for data integrity, is to look at data federation. Then obviously that brings us back to trust and integrity of sensors and data accountability for those people providing those data sets and then translating them and republishing the data. So that whole conversation around getting data, more recent data, easier available, but also the levels of trust in terms of that is probably going to be in future a very, very important conversation. That ties obviously in with Internet of Things, where we use multiple sensors and sensor fusion into this whole area.
Okay, thanks, Bertus. It's a good point, and we've noted that one down. I think we've also had a note from Simon on the chat around a national catalogue of data sets. I don't know if anyone's got any information on that, or whether that should be something that we'd be looking to move towards as part of this COP. Does anyone
certainly there's opendata.gov that's a repository for what's out there now. I think to combine both of those elements, there's obviously the government data, but then there's all this industry data as well. And then to describe them as a catalogue is really valuable, because then you can look at the connectors and then you can describe whether it's an API connector or a real-time feed connector, etc. I think that's a valuable body of work.
Okay. Thanks, Brent.
Because, sorry, just to comment out further, I think that there's a lot of discussion today around the traps in Australia about I need to build something, and a lot of what's being described as needing to be built already exists. It's just fragmented, and that the catalogue would be valuable. So it actually exists. Can I access it? Yes, no. Do I have to pay for it? Yes, no, blah, blah, blah. So I'd agree it's an important area.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Brent there. There are a whole range of very rich pockets of data available. we need to actually find a way of how to share that, but also making sure that we have the right access rights, accountabilities, integrity, and stuff built into it. That's what I mean when we say federation of data. It is a term that comes out of the IoT space.
Sure, thank you.
There was an old ITS project that I was part of too many moons ago, and that was ANZIDAR, and I should try and dig up some work on ANZIDAR. ANZIDAR was a Australian New Zealand ITS data repository, and it allowed you to look at the connectors between the data sets, and then obviously accessibility or privacy, all that stuff kicked in as well. And I don't know, maybe there can be some stuff we can reuse there. So I'll take that as an action to try and recall where we got to.
Thanks, Brent. That's good action to take. Paul Glover talking about data governance, policies, standards, exchange interoperability, metadata, etc., etc., etc. Big topic, Paul. But yeah, again, people's thoughts about whether that's something that we should be looking to move to. My view on these things is that it's great. But it's one of those things that would require a lot of dedication to actually complete, because it is quite a large job. What do others think?
Stephen, just on that, Candace got his hand up, so we'll hand over him for a question. But just briefly to Paul, a piece of work that the National Reference Committee for Mobility as a Service is running is on better understanding of data protocols for MAS. So we've been working with a small working group on that. So we'll be having a paper published at our MAS conference in September. So hopefully that will be of interest too. Kanav, if you want to take the floor.
Sure. Firstly, thank you everyone for hosting this, and hope you're all well. I just wanted to kind of touch on the data sharing aspect that we're talking about and having access to all data sets. To me, as a person running a startup, these things are quite big. So what I was kind of keen to understand was, is there maybe like a small proof of concept or a pilot that we can kind of talk about where we can establish the value of such community of practice, so we can all get a better insight into how these things would actually work when they actually achieve scale. And I think that would be kind of a view of where are people at right now, what are they struggling with right now, and can we share something or get access to some data to see the value being derived from this community of practice.
Thanks, Kanav. Yeah, look, I think that's a really good idea. And I think even going back to the National Reference Group piece, I think there's a good alignment there around, if it's whether it's all data or a subset of data is making MAS work. I think I agree. I think the the whole sort of how do we get all the data under control in the first instance would be a really large job. So that's a really good point. And as we were saying before, we're thinking of how do we pull together smaller groups to focus on particular elements. So that could be something that we could also have a look at. Just trying to
just add a comment. A lot of people, there's a few messages around in terms of data, integrity of the data, usage of the data, etc. I think one point may be able to, one thing we may want to include is some of the transparency and the explanation of the outcomes by using data, so that reflect back to what capacity, what limitation of the analytics or outcome related to a certain set of data. I think if there's a transparency explanation can be represented there, maybe help people to understand how they should use the outcomes, and then what expectations should there be a rise or kept around those themes.
And to complement you, Fang, with regards to that, and one of the questions that Paul Glover raised as well, is the fact that it is true, we have various data sets available out there, but we need to make sure that they are being used in the same way or producing the same results. What I have seen recently, for example, there is a lot, let's say, just a small example, a lot of OD matrices, origin to destination matrices that are being generated by various players in the industry. And all of a sudden you have you have a multitude of OD matrices coming from multiple sources. Which one do you use? Of course, they are all alimented and generated with different data sets. Some maybe provide a better picture than the other, but how are you going to make sure that the information you get is the same across? So this is food for thought in general, and how can we move towards that, and how can we support a standardization or like some sort of general usage and benefits to the whole community?
Sure. Thanks. Just before we get to you, Timothy, Brendan Siebert had removal of barriers blocking anyone to commercially use the data. Brendan, if you're happy to, would you like to maybe just give a little bit of an expansion on that one?
What I've found in you know, a lot of data sets and that have been available, there's always a lot of caveats around what you can do with that, and things that actually block commercial use. So some of those have been causing issues for people in the industry, where they cannot get agreements to be able to utilize some of this data. So I'm just trying to raise it as a point to try to, get everyone to be sharing as much as possible.
Okay.
Kind of looks back towards the governance piece.
Sure. Okay, understand. Thank you.
I can add that it's Bertus Pretorius here. I've been involved for many years between academia and private sector research, and that actually is a serious big problem for from commerce side. It's always been a big problem. Understandably, academia is pretty jealous on their data sets. They do research and work on it, and on the other hand, on the commercial side, we try to make money out of these things, and that is how we're going to manage that. And if we can bridge that gap, then we can actually enable a whole range of innovation within within industry as well as in academia, and get people to work together there.
Thanks, Bertus. We need to keep moving. We're getting close to time. Timothy, sorry, I missed your surname. The hand popped up so quickly. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, well, just further to what Simona just commented in terms of the data set. We also need to know in terms of whether or not the data set is the raw data set, or is that a post-processed data set, meaning like, well, if you have post-processed the data, then we will need to understand what has been changed, because, well, you probably have a kind of a model that do the post-processing, and then whether that actually influence or change the insight that can be gained from the data, it will have an impact on it. So yeah, I think that's something that we need to have a clear understanding. Okay,
thank you. What I might do is I might bring this session to a close, seeing we're close to our finish time. We had another agenda item about next steps. Stacey, what are your thoughts at the moment in terms of do we take these on board and look to do something, produce what we think is a reflection of what we've heard, and individuals can continue to provide their feedback, maybe through to ITS Australia. Stacey, I'm now starting to make more work for you, I know. What are your thoughts?
No, that's excellent. I think we've got more than enough input right now to put together something that we can test with the broader group against the scope. I've seen probably half a dozen potential projects that we could identify and flesh out. And then I think it's just a matter of getting consensus on which one should be first, and identifying resources of people. Once again, we're all volunteers for this. So what's the benefit for the broader group, and who's willing to throw in some brain work on it? So that's it for me. And these will be online meetings. So I'll send out the material once we've checked it with Stephen and Fang and Simona and Susan, and we'll just stay engaged as we all are online. Test out some different platforms, and if you could do the survey, that would be excellent. And so that would be it from us. And yeah, if you want to just, while we wrap up, pop any extra suggestions that you have into the chat, and if you don't have time, email them to me. You've all got my email address. So yes, we do have a terms of reference, so we should make sure that we circulate that so that you can review and test our thoughts. So, thanks everyone for your enthusiasm and interest, and I'll hand back to Stephen and Fang and Susan to wrap up.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'd just like to reflect Stacey's thanks for everyone's enthusiasm, great questions coming through, good ideas. Clearly there's a lot on people's minds, and I agree with some of the things around, how do we take the appropriate steps to move forward without trying to get everything done all at the one time. Fang, would you like to say anything?
Thanks, everyone, of course, to spend your time. I think at least we already achieved that the first goal is to bring people together, and we talk about the issues at the broad, a larger scale and the broader issues. So yeah, very happy about. Thank you, everyone, and we will be in touch.
Thanks, Fang. And Susan?
No, thanks very much, Stephen and Fang, for your leadership, and everyone for your active contributions here today. I think we've got a clear, we've spent some time looking at the pathway forward, and I think we're off to a good start for our inaugural meeting. So thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, well, we'll finish up there. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to the next meeting. There'll be communications in between the meetings as we've spoken about. Continue to keep the ideas coming through, and we'll be in touch soon. So thanks very much.